Hey, you, wherever you are in the world right now, thank you so much for being here with me. We know that we're living in some crazy times and we know that the world is changing. So let's create a bridge as we travel through one another's countries, coming together as one people, finding our home in one world. And as we do this, this is why our signature talk today, recovery of a teen mom, is so important. And today I have the privilege of honoring my guest speaker, Rhianna Campbell. Hi, Rhianna.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And Rhianna comes to us with 20 years of recovery of being a teen mom and turning that into finding empowerment and creating a business and growing that business to a multi-million dollar business, which is phenomenal. I don't know many people that can do something like that. So I think that's really incredible. And your story is really impactful because I know in our audience, we have so many people around the world right now that are going through really difficult times. There's people that have lost jobs. There may be teenagers out there that are listening that, may be pregnant right now or have a young baby that they have with them and are really struggling to figure out what they do next and how they navigate, the next step and what they're doing with life. Um, so as we go into this conversation, I'm going to give full disclosure that when I was in high school, my best friend actually got pregnant. And the relationship that I had with her standing side by side and watching her go through that journey and that process, it was one that I would say was definitely isolating in the sense that it felt like there was a lot of judgment from other people. There was a lot of bullying because you have the school situation. There's a lot of different things that kind of occurred during that moment in time. And as her best friend, I even got, chastised because I was friends, with her. And I was strong enough to handle that and remain friends with her. But, and, I know for a lot of people, they lose their friends and their circle of friends. But I really want to get into um, how we get into this journey and how this kind of evolved for you, Rhianna, because I know you have this story that goes with it. And we'll warn the audience, we're not going to stay in this negative space for a long time. We're going to turn this into a positive. I mean, my goodness, you created a multi-million dollar business. So we're definitely going to walk down this road, but we can't do the journey unless we start at the beginning. So I'm going to hand it over to you and I'll let you share.
Yeah, so I'd say it starts when I was young. My parents got divorced very early on when I was in elementary school. I lived with my mother and, my father, I saw him every other weekend. And, being a daddy's girl, I think one of the things that's really challenging when daddy leaves from every day in your life to, once every 14 days, it becomes super challenging to fill that hole that's left behind of the love that he used to give. And so, I struggled a lot. And the funny thing is, I remember going to therapy, even in elementary school, where I was in a group of kids whose parents had gotten divorced, and we used to talk about how, it's not our fault and the challenges that we were going to face when dealing with being in two separate households and having one parent in one household and another parent in one. And I never thought it was my fault, but I never knew, I never was given the tools to manage the feeling of the loss of love from a parent. And, over the years after my parents were divorced, their relationship became more challenging, and my father's role started to diminish more and more over time. And one of the things that was really challenging is, with my father leaving also, the relationship of his side of the family, his siblings and, his parents. And I think all of that also started to diminish. So I was in a pretty low place for a really long time. And because of that loss of love and that hole that was left in my life, I started seeking attention from other males. And, as I moved into my teenage years, I was in an environment where, kids were having sex very young. And I kind of got thrusted into being in that same space because I just was so desperate for love and attention. I was so desperate for affection. And that kind of led me to a very sad point in my life during that time.
Did your mom help support you in the grieving process of your dad being in a different household?
I want to say yes. I mean, she did, I think, everything she could do in trying to, raise two children on her own. I think she offered as much support as she could, but I was very silent. I kept my feelings to myself and I didn't really share, the space that I was in. I just kind of silently grieved the loss of, having a parent in my life. And I kept to myself for the most part. I was really great in school. So, I didn't have those challenges where my grades were falling or anything like that. So she probably didn't even see really much of any indication that I was having the challenges that I was having and I was depressed as I was.
Yeah.
So I think she managed things as best she could.
So with that period of time, and as you said, you were going through this depression and trying to figure things out. I mean, that's very challenging because you're trying to sort through a lot of feelings that you're not necessarily sure exactly what you're feeling. And with grief, I mean, we all know that there's different stages of grief. So I'm sure part of the depression was, with the loss of your father. But I'm wondering too, like as an adult, when you look back at this period of time in your life, I mean, if you had a piece of advice to offer your little girl self in that moment, what would you have told her?
One of the things I didn't do, now looking back, is I just stayed really silent about my feelings. I didn't share them. I wanted times with my friends to be happy moments. I wanted, times at school to be happy times. Like I sought happiness and joy from those moments. And the thought of sharing my sadness would completely deteriorate or challenge those times. And so I spent a lot of time not sharing my feelings and not exploring those feelings and just kind of sitting with them and feeling very isolated and alone. And so, when I think back, the one thing I could tell myself is to not isolate yourself, like not manage those things on your own, because even verbally being able to express those feelings to other people is a huge relief. Being able to share those thoughts and those feelings with others makes you feel supported in some ways. And I think having an outside perspective, somebody may have recognized that I was in a depression that I wasn't able to recognize. So, I think sharing that vulnerability with other people and being vulnerable enough to talk about some of the feelings I was having would have been probably the better route to take.
Yeah. And I know for a lot of kids, I mean, we were kids once too, so we can confidently say this. But I know for a lot of kids, it does feel easier just to isolate because you don't want judgment or you don't want, the perceptions that are placed and these kinds of things. And I know, just reaching out and connecting is so, so important to get that additional support. And one of the things that you said is that you just wanted someone to love you when your dad wasn't in the picture and you lost your dad's family. You started to redirect yourself into this mind, you know, thought process that you would find love from other people and primarily, young men. Um, but when you look at this time and you look at love, like everything about love was centered on your dad, it seemed. Like, do you, does that, I don't know if that's making sense, but um, for a lot of girls out there, because of the daughter connection, and
Right.
it's very strong. I do understand that, but I think that part of love and how we define love as girls, like we also need to find ways that we're not looking outside of ourselves, but we're looking inward and we're loving ourselves first and not looking outside of ourselves. And I just wonder if you had any role model to help you see that, that you were loved, like you're worthy. You know what I mean? That piece of it.
Yeah, no, I didn't have that. And I also, I don't remember a time where I learned that loving myself was love, or what it meant to love myself. You know, in my mind, and especially like growing up watching like Disney movies and all types of stuff, love came from another person. And so, you know, watching the dynamic between a female and a male character, you just assume that love is something that's shared between people and not about self, and not something that's internal. And so, the idea of loving myself was not even something I thought about. I didn't know where self love came from or valuing myself came from. That wasn't something that I saw or understood. And anything that seemed, and this is something I'm still learning today, anything that I saw where someone was looking out for themselves or asking people to meet their needs seemed very selfish to me. Um,
Mhm.
so I kind of learned the opposite of self-care to mean selfishness. And so, um, you know, I think having that framework of love coming from someone else made me seek out love from other people.
Yeah. So you're in this space where you are 14 years old. Is that right? When you got pregnant?
No, I was 17.
17.
I
Okay.
started having sex at 14,
Okay.
which is, when I started really trying to up my game to get more attention and seeking more affection from men.
Yeah. And I mean, during this period of time that you're sexually active, I mean, did you really feel love? I mean, you're in this motion, but do you really feel like you're being loved?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, when I look back, I any type of attention, male attention was satisfying, but it didn't fill the hole. It's just it was similar to food addiction, something kind of similar to that, where you eat in order to satisfy that need, or shopping addictions. You shop in order to fill this hole that you feel inside. But that doesn't solve the problem. And so, just like any other type of addiction, I just kept wanting more and more and more, because that small little bit of joy was enough, but it just didn't solve the issue that I had.
Yeah, and as you go through this process of being pregnant at 17 years old and having a baby and starting a life with, your daughter. I mean, you're really in this space that your whole life is now defined because you're responsible for another human being. How did that change you?
When I was younger, I remember even in elementary school, I was such a goal-oriented person. I had this goal of wanting to be a veterinarian, and I was determined to go to vet school. And I remember even, in middle school, looking at vet colleges because that was the path that I was going to take. And I was determined that that's what I was going to do. And that, kind of rolled into my high school years as well. But when I got pregnant, I knew that that may not be the path that I was going to take. And I wasn't sure exactly what being a mother was. I knew that, okay, I'd have someone that I was responsible for, and I'd have to take care of them and change diapers and give them bottles and that sort of thing. But I wasn't aware of the mental shift that I had to take in order to be a mother. So very early on, after my daughter was born, I struggled a lot with being a teenager and being a mother because they were mutually exclusive to me. Because my teenage friends were partying and, going out and having fun, and that side of me was missing, those teenage experiences. And as a mother, I felt like I wasn't too sure exactly what my place was, other than making sure that, this child survived. Like that was the bare minimum, making sure that, I could feed her and clothe her and clean her and, those basic necessities. That was a real struggle for me for the first couple years of her life. I wasn't too sure exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And I was failing at both. I was failing at being a teenager and failing at being a mother. I wasn't too sure exactly how that should look, but I knew that I needed to send her to daycare, and that meant I had to work. And so I had to get a job, and I had to make decisions about my own personal life. Because if I was working to make sure that she was living, and she was taken care of, what did that mean for my goals and kind of the hopes and dreams that I had for myself? And I wasn't exactly sure what that looked like.
Yeah. So as a teen mom, you talk about, these struggles, and I'm putting myself in your shoes, and I'm thinking that weight that you have on your shoulders must have been so heavy, because like you said, it's no longer that you're just thinking about yourself, but you have this daughter that you now have to make sure is okay at the same time. And I'm sure there were many low points that you were at, going through this process, because you're not even technically an adult, in the sense that, 25 years old, our frontal lobes close, and, we have our adult brain. So you're 17 years old, and you're still kind of struggling and figuring things out. But how did you navigate some of these low points that you were going through? Did you have support? Did you reach out for help? Like, what did you do?
I think probably the biggest feeling that I had about my situation was shame. I just felt very ashamed of my behavior, my conduct. I was ashamed that I was pregnant at a very young age. I was ashamed that I, had a child in high school. I carried that with me actually into my adulthood, even into my late 30s when I got pregnant again. But I carried that weight, and it was so heavy for me to deal with that. And I think one of the things that I noticed about myself was I never sought assistance or support from others. I was just always a very independent person, and just kept to myself and kept my feelings to myself. And I didn't like being vulnerable. And so I always felt very isolated in carrying the weight of those feelings. And, I eventually started opening up when I met, my boyfriend after I had my daughter, who's now like my life partner. When I met him, he was probably one of the first people that I could completely open up to and tell all my shameful stories and, explain what I had done and talk about my pains. And I think he was probably at that point my only support system, because he was the only person I would allow to be vulnerable with. Like I'd never want to be vulnerable with anyone else. So, not even family members really understood all the things I was going through, because I was great at maintaining a poker face and making everything seem like it was fine. So that was kind of a struggle for me.
But inside, you weren't feeling like it was fine.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
It was very much a struggle, and I lost myself, and I wasn't too sure who I was. I lost my identity.
Yeah.
Being mother wasn't the identity that I wanted to own, but it was the one I had. And I wasn't too sure exactly where that left me and who I was prior to getting pregnant. So
Yeah. And, in this place that you're in, I mean, what advice would you give to teen moms or people that, are in a circumstance where they have this kind of shame around this?
I think having a support network, and now kind of knowing how important that is and how crucial that is for, even in my adulthood, how important it is to have a support network. That's something I really wish I had at that time. And so seeking out support, going to therapy is so great, and life changing. And I just, it had so many negative connotations, and it just didn't seem like something I would want to do, especially like, my image of therapy was what you see on TV, and it just seemed like such a joke. And so I just didn't think that that would be a good place for me. But being able to open up and share with others is so important, and being able to be vulnerable. I mean, vulnerability is so important in order to grow. And if you have the same information churning through your head all the time, the problem's not usually getting solved. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see something that is so muddled for you, and so clear to others, because they're observing you or because they're hearing in a different way and they're not as deeply ingrained as you are. And so having outside perspectives is so essential to being able to really grow and thrive, in those type of times where things seem really hopeless and helpless and sad and challenging.
Yeah, and it's a strong message for the space that we're living in today, because people need that connectedness more than ever, and despite your circumstances, whatever they may be. But I wonder, you go from this space where you're this teen mom and you are being forced to reinvent yourself, right? Find this identity that you feel that you've lost. I mean, what was it that made you open your eyes to this change? Was it just feeling this discomfort in your space, or did something happen to cause you to make a shift?
So there was a point in time that I decided that I needed to think about what my future looked like. And I decided that, I had said I wanted to be a vet, and I wanted to explore what being a vet looked like. So I decided to get a job at a veterinary clinic to see if that course of action still made sense. And what I figured was, because I had to work to earn money to make sure that I could keep my child alive and take care of her and pay for childcare and all the things that she needed, then if I continued to work, but in a space that was kind of a mix of what I wanted and what I needed, then I would be able to find some answers. And I did find answers. I was able to figure out I did not want to be a vet. So it was a good place for me to really start.
Wait. So why did you not want to be a vet? I need to hear this.
So funny. I think one of the things that I really loved about the idea of being a vet was I loved animals. I really loved animals. And, I'd watch Animal Planet and Meerkat Mansion. And, I just felt like I just wanted to hug and cuddle all the animals. But what I learned was everybody hates the doctor, including animals. And so when you go to an animal clinic, they're not excited to see you. They're not happy to be there. It was the opposite. And I realized that as much as I loved animals, that was not the place for me to be. Taking care of animals was not this happy situation. And I had two very interesting experiences that I remember that turned me off from being a vet completely. And one was getting mauled by a cat who did not want to get shots. And the other was, a dog who was at the end of his life, and, they were making decisions on what to do. And that was just so depressing for me.
Oh.
So, having those two experiences made me realize, like, doctors are the same for animals as they are for people. And
Yeah.
And they're not happy situations the way I imagined it in my head. So it was a great experience. It also set me on a path of rediscovery, and really made me start thinking about what I wanted for my life, and made me start thinking about who I wanted to become and what the future held for me, and really changing my identity and shifting it from a confused teenage mother to an adult who was taking control of her life and really trying to figure out what was next. And I wasn't too sure what that path was for me, but the beginning of the exploration was that moment where I got the job at the veterinary clinic, because it was the opportunity for me to revisit who I was prior to being a mother, and then figuring out who I was going to be after I became the mother.
So so I get that you need to redefine yourself and you need to take control, but how do you sit yourself down and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do? I mean, did you create a vision board? Did you write it out in steps? And how did you find a direction to create a multi-million-dollar business? I know everybody's dying to hear this.
So one of the things that I did when I graduated from high school was I went to college. I got a full scholarship because I was such an excellent student. I got a full scholarship to go to college. And I started off in college, and I ended up dropping out because, working full time and going to school full time just was not working for me. But I knew I had to work full time in order to take care of my family. So I chose the path of dropping out of school and going to work full time. But I had the desire, especially after knowing that the veterinarian medicine was not going to work out for me, I had the desire to go back to school. And I knew that that would be the next step on my path, on my journey. But I just didn't know when I should do that or could do that, because I knew that I had done it and failed the first time around. And one of the things that can be really complicated, especially when you go to college to get your undergrad degree, is everyone's there full time. They're living on campus, and most of them don't have families to take care of. And even if they have jobs, they're working part time, maybe. And I knew that the expense of childcare was really what was killing me financially. It was so expensive to put my daughter in childcare. So I thought to myself that there would be a moment that I could figure out when it would make sense financially for me to not work full time. And that moment would likely be when she would go to school. And so when she went to kindergarten and I didn't have to pay for childcare anymore, that was my moment where I could start really thinking about going back to school. So I planned for that moment. I spent maybe a year or two really planning for that moment to make sure that I did everything I could in advance of going back to school. And lucky for me, even though I had dropped out, my enrollment was still open. I could still go back to the same school, just not under the scholarship that I was on before. So I just focused on that, and being able to focus on that, even though it was a couple years out, was the one thing that I kind of had in my mind, that was the vision that I was working towards.
So you create this plan and you start to implement this plan. And I know firsthand how hard it is to go to school and work full time, because I did that too myself. So I know that's very hard. But what's amazing is that people that go through very difficult circumstances always find a way and are very resourceful. And they find resourcefulness because they're kind of forced into it, right? So when you're creating this plan and your daughter goes to school, you now have this open window. Like, what is your next plan? I know, you've got this strategy that you're putting together. So how do you start to work your strategy to get to where you want to go?
So it's funny, because when I think about that time, after I made the decision that that's what I wanted to do, that seemed like the right next step for me, I feel like everything just started working in my favor. And I wasn't sure why, and I wasn't too sure how, but things just seemed to fall into place. So even to the point where I reached back out to the school to find out if I could re-enroll, and they said yes, I knew that was my opportunity to really go back to school. And at the time, I had a job. I was working full time, and the funny thing is, right around the time where I was supposed to go back to school, they laid me off, which was just like, if I didn't already have that plan, I probably would have been very sad about it, but the timing couldn't have been more perfect. It was the opportunity for me to just be relieved of that experience and that responsibility, and not have to drive 40 minutes to do that job anymore. I was given the permission to now focus primarily on school. And so all the steps that I took leading up to me going back to school, and even the opportunity for me to be in school, all just worked out really well for me, and was just set up so perfectly for me. So even though, I had taken some steps, there were just so many things that I just felt like just happened so perfectly and ideally for me to be able to make that happen.
Yeah. And for anyone that is listening, I think, your story and how you're executing a plan, putting something together is really key, because for a lot of people, especially in today's world, it seems like people want instant gratification. They expect something to just kind of fall into their lap, or, not put the hard work in or do the hard work. And the reality is you have to do the hard work. The reality is you do have to create a plan to build success. And that's really what you're outlining, to our guest. And if I could take you back to when you were in school, I mean, is there anything that you wish you knew back then that you know now, being on the other side of that?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that was great about school is it allowed me space to really discover and understand who I was. But again, I think going back to some of the things that I had mentioned before is like the support system. Having that support system was so crucial in even being able to navigate the ups and downs of school. And when you're trying to figure out who you are, sometimes the people that are closest to you know you better than you do. And so I had gone through a moment of, deciding, okay, I was going into pre-med because that was kind of similar to being a vet and, close enough and was a respectful job. And so I committed to go into pre-med and took a whole bunch of biology classes, and I was not good at science. And, it took my boyfriend at the time to be able to like talk me out of it. And because I was so frustrated one day, and I was in class, I was like not doing well. I was getting bad grades, and, I'm an overachiever. So that was not okay for me. And I decided to skip class one day, and I go outside and I sit down on a park bench outside of my biology building and called him in frustration, just, crying about how I just didn't know what I was doing with myself. And he stopped me and he was just like, I never knew why you wanted to be pre-med anyway, because all you do is you spend your days on your spreadsheets and you're doing numbers and you're running your budget and you're rewriting your budget and spreadsheets and you're doing all this formulas and cells and like all types of stuff. And it didn't occur to me that what I was doing outside of school had nothing to do with what I was doing in school. It just never made sense. It just never clicked. But again, somebody else's observation of me helped to identify things that just were just not as obvious to me. And that set me on the path that led to where I am today. Me changing my major, discovering my gifts and my talents and things that I did well, and being able to continue to build on those strengths and not focus on the weaknesses and trying to overcome my weaknesses.
Yeah. And I think that's so important for everyone, is to recognize that you do have these gifts and these talents, and building on them just makes it even more beautiful and something that people really need to remember. So often, I think in school, we're conditioned that, you have to improve on this area because you're not strong in that area. But it's really interesting because, we're all unique. So the things that we are strong on are really the things that we need to put our attention into and really work on those areas to help, strengthen them, because that is our gift. That's what we're supposed to do.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it makes perfect sense. And there you have it, audience. You get your $1 million business by doing that. So I have one last question for you. If I were to find your earth angel feather on the ground, what would your message to the world be?
So my message kind of relates to what you just said, which is, think about what gifts you have, and, what your purpose is in the world. Because I think one of the things that I've learned on the journey of, building a business and building a team around me and building a support network all stemmed from who I was and what I needed. And I had to figure that out. And it took a long time for me to figure that out. And just like you said, like, when you're in school, you had to kind of be good at everything. Getting good grades in all of your classes meant that you were a good student, but that's not really how life works. Like, I had to figure out that I had strengths and I had a gift and I had things that I could do really, really well. And the more I focused on doing those things really well, the better I got. And, when you're trying to kind of figure out what you can do in the world, being your best self and being able to strengthen those gifts and those talents is really what's going to heal everything going on in the world today.
Yeah, and it's so powerful, and I I just can't express to you enough, the gratitude I have for your vulnerability, for your courage to go into, this area of your life that wasn't easy and to share that with the world. And I just thank you on behalf of the listeners who can relate to you, because I just know there's so many people that can resonate with the story that you have, and some of the advice that you've given and the tools that you've given are just so impactful and so helpful. So much gratitude, Rhianna. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate it.
And this is Retreat to Peace, and I'm Catherine Daniels, and that's all we have time for today. So live your authentic life with peace, and we'll see you next time. Retreat to Peace. Welcome back. I remember in high school, my best friend got pregnant, and the rumors that circulated around the school about her pregnancy, about who the father was, the things that were shared, the things that were said, it was really heartbreaking to watch unfold for her family, for her brother who was in school with us. And as her best friend, I just felt it was so important just to be by her side and support her. So many people came to me and said, how can you still be friends with someone who got pregnant? Like, what does that say about you? And at the time, I didn't care what it said about me, because I knew that she was being shunned by so many and she needed the support. And this interview that I did was so incredible, because here you had a teenage mom who took her life and just completely turned it around by focusing on her goals, her dreams, her aspirations. And it's just a testimony to how important it is to focus on the things that you're good at, focus on the things that you want to do and build for your life and be abundant with. One of the things that I always say to children, especially, is when they say, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know what I'm supposed to be when I grow up. What are your gifts? That's my question. What is the gift that God gave you that is going to build your dream? What is the gift that gives you the fortitude to give back to the world? Each and every one of us are here for a special reason. We have chosen this journey to be part of something special in the world and have a place in the world that is going to contribute. But what is it that serves that space for you? So often people are wondering what that purpose is, and they can go through the lifetime, several lifetimes, trying to figure it out and still not have any idea of what exactly their purpose is. If this is something that you struggle with, have you considered putting together some goals? Start with your short-term goals. What are your short-term goals? What would you like to do over the next year? Maybe the next 2 years? Maybe put in 5-year goals. Put in what it is that you would like to do for yourself over the next 5 years. And then put in your long-term goals. Sometimes pulling out goals can be fun if you're using a stack of magazines or pictures that you can glue onto a board, and you could actually create a vision board. Every year I create a vision board and I subconsciously manifest the things that I would like for my life. My vision board usually includes the short term things, the intermediate, and the long term goals that I am seeking to achieve for myself. Having goals puts perspective on things because it gives you something to look forward to. Not all of those goals will you meet in the timeline that you expect. I mean, my goodness, we just went through 2020 where the entire globe was derailed and people had to take a step back and reevaluate things and reevaluate where they're going, what they're doing, how they're spending their time, how they're spending their life, the people that they're associating with, and put themselves in a more authentic space. So if you're doing that and you're thinking about the future, think about things in such a way that are going to complement your gifts, the gifts that God gave you. Often, when children are trying to figure out what they should be when they grow up, one of the easiest ways to identify some of that is to think about what it was that you were doing when you were a young child. So, if you were in kindergarten or preschool or first grade, what was it that you were doing? Were you playing house? Were you pretending to be a teacher? Were you pretending to be a scientist because you were intrigued with bugs? Maybe you were studying the plants, so you are naturally gifted towards ecology. There's a whole gamut of things that we do as children just naturally, innately, because that is intuitively wired into us that this is part of our life and this is part of our calling in life. So if you think back to that time, or even ask your mother, or ask someone that knew you when you were a child, what was it that I used to do? What was it that made me happy? What did I gravitate towards? For artists, they would draw and paint and create art all the time. And that's something that's just naturally a gift for them. And for a lot of artists, they're afraid to go into an art career because they're afraid that they're going to be judged or they're not going to be able to maintain a living. There's a variety of reasons that they may have around it. But what they're also missing is that this authentic true self that they have, there is this creative side, this art side that does need to come out and speak and be part of the world. And for a lot of artists, especially famous artists that we would know, we actually find out that when they came out into the mainstream and into the light, often it was when they were much older in life, because that's when they couldn't fight their talent. They couldn't fight what it was that they had inside of them, and they actually started to create. So it's really interesting how our journeys work. I mean, there's often times that we will stumble and fall upon our journey to find our way. And if you're presently doing something that is out of alignment with your soul journey, you're going to know that, because you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be fulfilled or satisfied. And it is something that you need to be aware of, because it's going to continue to manifest and look the way that it does until there is a correction, whatever that may mean for you in this moment in time. So as we look at things that are our strength, one of the ways that you can pull out your strength is to literally make a list of what are the things that I am really good at. What things am I really good at? And put a list together. And then make another list and ask yourself, what things do I like to do? What are the things that I like to do? And put 5 things together that you really enjoy doing. And you'll be surprised, because if you cross-check your 2 lists, you're actually going to discover that your authentic true self is right in front of you. The things that are really bubbling up or overlapping are the things that make you who you are. And they're part of your gift, your talent. They're part of the things that make you happy. So gravitate towards those things that make you happy. And speaking of things that make you happy, what have you done lately to create joy in your life? Have you done anything that creates a space where you're feeling joy? Most recently, I went and got the mail, and like most people in their mailbox, they have a lot of junk mail. And I was sifting through some of the mail that I had, and I actually received a catalog that I'd never received before. But interestingly enough, I was very intrigued by it because it had some of the favorite things that I enjoy. And as I started to flip through it, I started to recognize I haven't done some of the things that I enjoy for quite some time. So I'm making a conscious effort to refocus and reshift and start to create some space where I can put aside the time to do some of the things that I actually enjoy. And one of the things that I've also recognized is that I need to spend more time in learning and just finding new things to learn about. It's so important we exercise our brain. And part of exercising our brain is learning new things. So one of the things that I decided that I was going to take some more time to learn about is a specific area of healing work, and that will accompany the other healing work that I already do. But I wanted this particular part of the healing work to be unique, but also something that I would have to learn from the ground up and get myself acquainted with and familiar with, that I could be able to share it with the world. So I'm asking you, what can you do to create more joy in your life? What can you do to invite that in? What is something that you would like to learn? And how can you go about that? Maybe put that vision board together. Put something together that is going to motivate you, help bring you into a space that is going to inspire you. And I know as the world continues to turn and we go through more uncertainty of what's ahead, and I know there's a lot of countries that are really struggling as this is airing. I just want to extend my deepest appreciation for your time with me to listen to this program, and I'm hoping that it brings you some comfort and some peace. But I also hope that these small messages on a weekly basis are also creating a safe space for you to feel some comfort, to feel some sort of space that maybe you weren't feeling before, that you can relate to, or maybe it's going to give you some insight or generate some hope. We will not sit in this time forever. That is the truth, and we'll continue to bridge into a new space as a world. Some countries are going to feel the hardship of that more than other countries. And I think there's so much around this that we just don't know. But I also think that we should remain grounded and centered, and especially centered for ourselves and for our families. And if it just takes a few things, a few tools that you can learn to help just bring you calm. One of the things that you can do, as we discuss, is the self-care and just taking care of yourself. So making sure that you're getting a walk in every day, getting sunshine, letting the light in. Make sure you're eating healthy food. Make sure you're drinking water. Make sure you're literally detoxing your body. Right now, with everything that's going on in the world, every single human on the planet, we're all going through a lot of grief, a lot of loss, a lot of despair, a lot of trials and tribulations. And I know it feels like it's unending. And the truth is that this is just a moment in time. We're going to continue to move forward. We will move through this period of time. Remain hopeful, remain in your faith. Know that you are never, ever alone. And always reach out to the people that are truly suffering, because there are people that are strong and there are people that are weak, and we balance each other out. So it's important for when you're feeling strong that you reach out to someone that is feeling weak. So continue to live your life in the highest light that you possibly can. Find your joy, find your abundance, have your happiness, and continue to plan to move forward. Everything will work itself out. Next week, join us as Jesse An Nichols George joins us for a very intimate conversation around the code journey. She is the author of the Code Journey, and she shares a daily guide on life on Earth. And this guide is something that is very unique in the way that is presented and how you use it. And during my conversation, we will talk about how this came to be, what this reference book is for, and how you use it. It's a great conversation. I think that you'll really enjoy, and it gives a different perspective on how things are as far as where we are in today's times and how we're living. I just encourage each of you, as you're listening week to week, to just continue to remain strong in your faith, continue to know that you're not alone and we're all going through this together, and it really will be okay. So I look forward to the coming weeks and sharing some very great interviews that I have. And as always, if you would like to contact Retreat to Peace, you may email us at retreattopeacellc@gmail.com. And we welcome your letters, we welcome your feedback, we welcome any information you may have around different things that you would like for topics. And you'll also be on our mailing list that we can forward to you our upcoming retreats and what it is that we're putting together as far as moving forward. So thank you again so much for joining us today. This is Catherine Daniels from Retreat to Peace, reminding you to live your authentic life with peace, and as always, retreat to peace. And we'll see you next time.